How is it going? I'm going to see if I can move. I cannot. I'm down here in the corner. Um, Welcome to Oxnard Movement. You're probably watching this because we have an intro session scheduled. And prior to that intro session, I just want to share a little bit more kind of about who we are as a business, um, what we do, and why we do it. I think that's a good thing to share with anybody that's potentially new that's coming in. So I want to share some of those things with you. The first thing that we'll talk about four different things today. These four different things, the 10 domains of fitness, the different metabolic pathways that we use to utilize energy, the sickness, wellness, fitness continuum, and the use of intensity, how and why we use intensity. So we'll get right into it. Following this conversation, hopefully you have a much better understanding of kind of who we are and what we do. So the first thing is the 10 domains of fitness. Now, we all might come into a gym because we all want to be more fit, but we all might have different definitions of what it means to be fit. So I want to share with you what our definition of fitness is so that when I say, hey, so and so, you're getting more fit, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And to be fit for us is to be competent across these 10 general physical skills. What are those 10 general physical skills? Well, they're cardio, stamina, strength, flexibility, core power, speed, coordination, agility, accuracy, and balance. And what do I mean by competent? I mean, if you were to give yourself a 1 to 10 score in all of these different areas, you would score somewhere like a 6 to 8 in all of them. What I don't want from somebody is that they can run a 5-minute mile or a 3-hour marathon, so they're a 10 in cardio, but they can't touch their toes, so they're a 2 in flexibility. What I don't want from somebody is they can put 400 pounds on a bar and back squat it, so they're a 10 in strength, but they can't jump on top of a box. So they're 2 in coordination. I want to be balanced across all 10 of these general physical skills, not just have one or two that I'm very good at. Now, you may look at this list and think, well, there are one or two that I'm good at, and there's some that I am not so good at. That is 100% relatable and totally okay. We are all there. Our goal is to bring all of these to that 6 to 8 range. And you'll notice that there's some brackets here. These are kind of broken up into two different categories. The top four, cardio, stamina, strength, and flexibility, are what we call physiological changes. Those are changes that we can actually see inside the body. Those are things referred to as training adaptations. And those bottom four, coordination, agility, accuracy, and balance, those are neurological adaptations. And those are things that we typically refer to as practice adaptations. So those top four are training adaptations, and those bottom four are practice adaptations. And the two in the middle, power and speed, are a combination of both training adaptations and practice adaptations. And power is a big one for us because we like to use power. In exercise physiology, power is exactly equal to intensity. So if something's more intense, it's more powerful. And if something's more powerful, it's more intense. The physics equation, or the equation for power output, is force times distance divided by time. Or in other words, hey, how heavy is something? How far is it moving? And how long does it take me to do it? We're going to give a little example here so we can figure out why this is going to be relevant for us. So I'm going to say, let's take your body weight. You're going to run 1 mile with it, and it's going to take you 8 minutes. Now we could calculate an actual power output for this scenario. Then we could change each of those variables. For the sake of simplicity, I just want to change one of these variables. I want to change the body weight because I'm going to give you a 20-pound weight vest. If I give you a 20-pound weight vest, I increase that body weight by 20 pounds. I want you to run that same 1 mile distance, and I want you to run it in the same 8-minute time domain. Now, if we do that, the other side, the left side of that equation, power output, will also change. So if I change the force output, I increase it and keep the distance and the time the same, my power output will also increase. And if my power output increases, my intensity is also increasing. And that makes sense logically. You're like, if I run a mile with a 20-pound weight vest in the same amount of time that I run a mile without a 20-pound weight vest, the one with the weight vest was more intense. Well, this is why, mathematically speaking, that happens. Here's the catch, though. We don't really measure things like this. We could, but this is a little bit more theoretical for us. We are going to measure things inside the gym, like how many rounds and reps did you complete in X amount of time? Or what was your total time for the amount of work that you did today? Or what was your total weight for the workout today? Or what was your total amount of reps for the given weight today? So that's how we're going to measure power output across time. And then we'll talk later on today on why power/intensity is going to be a relevant thing for us. The next thing we'll talk about is our metabolic pathways. We've got 3 different metabolic pathways. Basically, metabolic pathways is how we utilize energy inside the body. And we've got 3 of them. We've got stuff that's on the left side of this chart that is very high power output, but it's very short in duration. That's our phosphocreatine system. Then we have stuff that sits right in the middle of this chart, and that is called our phosphocreatine system, not phosphocreatine, our glycolytic system. That is a middle duration and a middle power output. And then we have our oxidative system. And our oxidative system is a lower power output, but it is a longer duration of time. And we put all these systems on a graph like this, where power output is on the left side of that graph, 100% of our power output being at the top and 0% being at the bottom, and time being on the x-axis, with the far left being 0 minutes and the far right of that chart being maybe 1 or 2 hours. We can kind of create a best fit line for all of those energy systems. It looks something like this. And that area underneath that curve, or each of those bars, would be considered your work capacity, your ability to do things. And we want to increase your work capacity across broad, time, and modal domains. Blah, 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 blah. I just want you to be able to do more stuff. Heavy stuff, light stuff, running, jumping, swimming, biking. I don't really care what it is. I just want you to be able to do more of it. So as you can see here, if we raise that line, that red line, and add it to your ability to do things, then you're going to be better off. And how do we raise that line on all different sides? Well, we kind of train 3 different time domains that each correlate with an energy system. If in any 30 days worth of our programming, you're probably going to see about 20 of those days, maybe 18 of those days, that are between 6 and 15 minutes long in duration. The class is always an hour, but the hard portion of the day might be between 6 and 15 minutes long. And then you might see 5 to 6 days throughout the month that the workout, the hard portion of the month or the day, might be less than 3 minutes long. And then you might see 5 to 6 days throughout the month that the hard portion of the day might be 20 minutes or longer. And here's why. When we train those things in the middle, those modalities in the middle, we get better at those things in the middle. When we train those things in the middle, we get a little bit better at the short stuff. And when we train those things in the middle, we get a little bit better at the long stuff. But we know that in order to get the full adaptation out of that short stuff, every once in a while, I have to do some short stuff. And in order to get the full adaptation out of that long stuff, every once in a while, I have to do some long stuff as well. With the ultimate goal of being able to say yes to whatever activities you want to say yes to. We don't think that physical limits should be keeping you from doing what you want to be able to do. Cool. And this next piece is our why. It is probably the most important thing that you'll get out of this today. And it's something that you and the doctor may have discussed before. Maybe it's something that we can talk about and you can kind of understand here. So when you go into the doctor, there is some biometrics or vitals the doctor can take that they can say you're either normal, you're not normal, or you're somewhere in the middle. And some of these numbers sit like this. That blood pressure, or normal numbers for blood pressure, is 120 over 80. Normal numbers for a resting heart rate is 72 beats per minute. Normal numbers for percentage body fat is 18 to 22%. Normal numbers for a resting blood glucose is 70 to 120 milliliters per deciliter. And there's also normal numbers for bone density. There's also normal numbers for things like high density cholesterol, low density cholesterol, A1C levels, blood triglycerides, all sorts of things the doctor can say, hey, so and so, you're normal, you're normal, you're not normal, you're normal, you're not normal, you're normal, you're not normal. And we can go two directions from normal. We can go left towards the sickness on this chart, or we can go right towards the fitness on the chart. So we'll look at some of what these metrics or numbers look like at each of those sides. So on the left side or sickness side, we've got a blood pressure of 175 over 100. We consider that hypertensive or high blood pressure. We have a resting heart rate of 100 beats per minute or more. We consider that a tachycardic person or an elevated resting heart rate. A body fat percentage of 35% or more, we call that obesity or overweight. A blood glucose of 200 milliliters per deciliter or more, we'll call that diabetes. And low levels of bone density, we'll call that osteoporosis. Those blood pressure, heart rate, and body fat percentage also contribute to things called coronary heart disease or congestive heart failure. So, all the things on that left side of that chart for those metrics are what we'd consider chronic illnesses. Great news about chronic illnesses, though, is they're completely preventable and reversible with lifestyle, with eating well and exercising regularly. So, let's look at the other side of what this chart looks like. When somebody is fit, what do these metrics look like? Now, if I'm a fit person, my blood pressure might look like 105 over 70. My heart rate might look like a resting heart rate of 55 beats per minute or less. My body fat percentage might look like something between 12 and 16%. My blood glucose, resting blood glucose, might look like something between 60 and 100 milliliters per deciliter. And I'll likely have elevated levels of bone density as well. Now, here's the deal. We all sit somewhere on this continuum. It may be just left of the wellness, it may be just right of the wellness, it may be very far on the left, it may be very far on the right. Well, wherever you are, I want to take you, or we want to take you, as far over to that right side as we possibly can. Let's get over to that right side, that fit side, as far as we can. And we do that with CrossFit, with constantly varied functional movement performed at high intensities. We're under no impression that CrossFit is the only way to get fit. There are lots of different ways to get fit. We just think that CrossFit is extremely effective, and so that's what we've chosen to use. But then the other half of that, not only do I want you to get over on that fitness side, but I want you to stay over there. And I want you to stay over there for as long as you possibly can. And we do that with community, with surrounding yourself with people who also think it's important to eat well and exercise regularly. You may have heard of some of the sayings like, you're the average of your 5 closest friends. You may have heard, birds of a feather flock together. You may have heard, you are what you eat. All of those are anecdotal evidence for the power of association. We all know that if I can associate myself with something or people who believe something, that I am more likely to do those things or believe those things. And here's why that's important, is because inevitably, life happens. We can't always eat like we want to, sleep like we want to. Work gets stressful, family stuff comes up, relationships get hard. I don't know when it is, but I know that as soon as I feel like I have all of my life under control, life decides to hand me whatever it wants to hand me. And when it hands me that, I start to slide back towards that wellness. If I'm on the far right, I start to slide towards the left. And it could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, a year down the road. And it's not if it happens. We all know that it will happen to all of us at some point. I go back into my doc and I'm like, Doc, it's been a rough year. I'm not really eating well. I've kind of been stressed out at work. I've got some family stuff going on. And the doctor says, hey, you know what? You're going to be fine. Your numbers that are showing up, they're normal. You're going to figure it out. You're going to get back into things. You're going to get healthy again. And you're going to be totally fine. I wouldn't have anything to worry about. But if I start out right around those wellness numbers and I start to slide towards the left, could be 3 months, could be 6 months, could be a year, could be 2 years, could be 3 years down the road. And I go back to my doc and I say, Doc, I'm a couple years older now. Maybe it's getting a little bit harder for me to eat well. Maybe I got a little bit more responsibility at work now. Maybe I've got more responsibilities at home with my family. Maybe I'm more stressed out. Maybe I'm getting less sleep. And my doc says, hey, we could have a conversation. We need to make some changes today, not tomorrow, not next week, not next month. Because these numbers over here on the left, these aren't numbers that we could live with. So we got to take some meds. That conversation is not a conversation I want anyone to ever have with their doctor. And the reason that we exist as a facility, Oxnard Movement exists as a facility, is so that we can get as far away from that conversation as we possibly can. And we can stay away from that conversation for as long as we possibly can. We get there with our CrossFit. We stay there with our community. We need a support system that's in place to help us when it gets tough, because times will get tough. We know that. Life happens. And I think that's important to share with anybody who's wanting to come into our space, because I'm the owner here and I've still experienced this. There's been times where I've had my team come into the office and drag me and say, hey, Kolby, you need to go work out. We need to go work out. You need to get something taken care of. I've got lots of work to do. There's lots of things going on. It doesn't matter. You know you need this. Awesome. Thank you. I want people like that are surrounding me. If I have people around me who think it's important to eat well and exercise regularly, the likelihood that I keep those things up for a long period of time goes way up. So that's the other half of this space. And it's really the most important reason that we exist, is so that less of those conversations ever take place with the doctor. Now, I don't really ask for these numbers. People share them with me often. But you and the conversations that you have with your doctor, let's see what they tend to look like after you've been at CrossFit for 6 months, for 9 months, for a year, for 2 years. And tell me what your doctor is telling you. Cool. The last thing that I want to talk about is intensity. This is the fun conversation, or maybe not fun. Intensity is hard. And before we get into kind of why, let's give it a little analogy. I want you to think about the last time you drove on the freeway. It's probably been in the last couple of days, and you probably drove 75 miles an hour or faster. Now, the reality is that's pretty dangerous. But I want you to think about how you felt. Did you feel like you were in danger? And your answer is probably not. And that's because of these three things: mechanics, consistency, and then and only then intensity. When you first learned how to drive, you probably learned in a parking lot. And then you started to add some residential roads or side roads. Then you started adding intersections with stop signs. Then you started adding intersections with stoplights. Okay, then we started merging on the freeway and merging off the freeway until you felt comfortable going 75 miles an hour on the freeway. Now, why do we use the freeway? Well, usually it's the fastest way from where we are to where we're headed. Maybe not in all cases in Southern California. Yes, I know, I get it. But in general cases, the freeway is the fastest way from where I'm at to where I'm headed. Now, intensity is that same thing for us for fitness. Intensity is the independent variable most commonly associated with favorable adaptations to training. Blah, 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 blah. Intensity is our freeway to fitness. It's the fastest way to get from unfit to fit. But here's the catch. I cannot overlook mechanics and consistency in those mechanics before I start to add intensity. And here's why. In life, we always make risk reward decisions. We do that all the time. You do something over and over and over again. You're going to ask yourself, hey, why am I doing this? Is the risk worth the reward? Is the risk worth the reward? And we want the reward to be as big as we can while the risk to be as small as we can. So I want to take that freeway analogy and relate it to our fitness analogy. So in the freeway, our reward for driving on the freeway is what I call maximizing mobility. And that's not how far can you reach towards your toes. That's our ability to move within the world quickly. That provides a lot of value or a lot of reward for us as humans. If I can um, drive to work faster, I can have more leisure time. Now, what's the risk of driving on the freeway? Well, the ultimate risk is getting killed in an accident. I want to mitigate that risk as much as I can while also maximizing that reward. I want as much mobility as I possibly can with as little risk of death as I possibly can get. Now, let's look at that same example as it relates to fitness and intensity. Now, when we use intensity in exercise, the reward for us is we want to maximize the amount of fitness that we are gaining. We want to get as fit as we possibly can. But I also want to reduce my risk of injury. I want to maximize my fitness while also mitigating my risk of injury. And the only way to do that is if we look at those mechanics first. Then we start to think about consistency in those mechanics, and then we add intensity when we're ready for it. We can still get fit. You can still get to where you're going without using the freeway. It's just going to take longer. We can still get fit without using intensity, but it's just going to take longer. But if I know that there's a tool that works to get me there faster, and I've put in the work to work on my mechanics and be consistent in them, why would I not use that tool? That's why we do one-on-ones up front before we let anyone into group classes. We want to make sure that you're competent and confident in the movements before we're asking you to go hard, heavy, or fast. Awesome. Thank you so much for listening to this little conversation. I'm looking forward to meeting you in person here in the next few days. If you've got any questions about any of this, please bring it up in our conversations. I will probably touch base on a few of these things. I'm looking forward to meeting with you and seeing how Oxnard Movement can help you move to your next steps in your life. Have a good one.